Bastards. Today we're gonna talk about what you can do, what preventive measurements you can take during a nuclear disaster inside of your house. Because when there is a nuclear disaster and you cannot evacuate, or it's not like the threat is that nearby, but still a possible threat because of the fallout that get dragged in the atmosphere or by the wind. So what do you do? I'm going to show you all the possible weak spots inside of your house. But the first things I would advise is fill every bucket, water tub, and sink, every bottle, everything that can contain water. You need to fill up with water. Why? Because the water supply might be contaminated. So use all the water that you perhaps can salvage yet. And then close off the water supply inside of your house. So contaminated water that might get contaminated over the days, weeks, or even a month cannot get inside of your house. Alright, that's a danger to be very wary of. Next thing I would suggest is for the toilets, perhaps I will show you in a minute, but if you cannot use your toilet because of one of the reasons I will tell you in a moment, you can be prepared enough with plastic bags or garbage bags to do your business in. Seal them off and then try to put them in a safe area like a garden house or a porch. It's somewhere outside, so it will not cause infections or bad odor inside of the house you will bug in. Next thing is again, plastic bags are perfect to, like I will show you in a minute, to try to seal off all the possible entrances where contaminated air can get inside of the house. So you don't want any particles, nuclear particles inside of your house, because you cannot remove those, especially in a bug-in, and you want to avoid those. So plastic bags, plastic sheets, tarps, isolation tape, and also use strong tape, so it has a good adhesive quality. So I will now show you all the possible weak points and measurements you can take during a nuclear disaster while you go bugging. So another thing to always keep ready during a nuclear disaster is your bug out bag. I would say also use a bug out bag like you're going away for a long time and not just a small one. Why? First of all, sometimes, like in the case in Chernobyl, the government first lied or downplayed the incident. So yeah, that could happen anywhere, to say, or people are not really realizing yet the severity of the meltdown or the accident. So it could be possible that you must leave at any minute. So like when the government or local authorities say on the radio that the nuclear accident is worse than they thought, and everyone in a certain area needs to evacuate as fast as possible, always keep your bug out bag standby so you can leave within the minute. Because imagine when everyone hears this at the same time on the radio, on the news, social media, everyone will leave at the same time. First of all, leave with a bug out bag and leave like you won't come back. I don't say you will not come back. I just want to say leave as if you're not coming back, because that's what happened in Chernobyl. People thought they were only going away for a few days or even a few weeks, mostly a month, but they never returned back to their homes, which is now even left behind for 60 years or even more, 80 years perhaps. But that says a lot about the possible situation. And if you leave with a bug out bag, don't forget to have a CBRN bag ready also, because I imagine when you're going to evacuate during a disaster, like it's worse than they said, like I said, all people will leave the area at the same time. So a car will not be used, I guess, except when there are special evacuation convoys set up by the government or something. But leaving with your own car will be not will be very difficult. Why? Because everyone is in panic, stress. There will be second. All right, I'm back. There was somebody at the door. So where was I? Oh yeah, the roads. Yeah, the roads will be packed even on a normal day during traffic hour. Cars, one broken down car or accident can stop a whole highway. So imagine that if you want to get away, it will be difficult. And not only that, like I said before, your gas tank might be contaminated with radioactivity from the area. So if you want to flee or evacuate, it's possible that governments or borders will set up control posts to stop cars from spreading the radioactivity with their exhaust. So that's something to take in consideration. I would say try to take back roads, not the main roads where everybody will be going, and try to get around that way. It maybe take longer, but you will eventually get out of the danger zone, to say, or the contaminated zone. So that's something to think about when you're trying to bug out during a disaster area. Bug outs will be that the plan for when you want to bug out is only dependent on you or what the local areas will say. Do you go? Don't you go? What are the risks? Try to measure it. If you must go outside during bug-in, I would advise try to stay inside during a bug-in in a nuclear disaster as long as possible. At least 9 weeks, because that's the time it needs, the most radiation needs to get blown away by the wind or get being blown over the area by the wind or in the atmosphere, so that the risk for radiation is at their minimum. Don't forget, I said minimum. It doesn't mean that it is at its minimum that it's not dangerous. It's just the minimum standard to leave your shelter during a nuclear disaster. So if you must leave for one reason or the other, these are several civilian ways to protect yourself. The most important thing is to keep yourself covered against dust, contaminated dust, wind, and other particles that can fall from the sky during the fallout. So try to cover as much area of the body as you can. That's why I laid this on the table. First of all, you need, especially gas mask. Any gas mask is better than no gas mask. Try to get military grade with CBRN capabilities and reserve filters, because what you want to do is, before you want to screw on a new filter every time you're going to leave the house, so you don't get the dirty filter canister inside. So try to decontaminate the gas mask and replace the filter. So gas mask, filter, reserve filters for to protect your breathing and your mouth and your eyes. Next, we have 3 options that civilians most likely have. The first one is just a rain poncho. These are the military grade rain poncho, but most civilians use them for bike rides in the rain. These can cover from head to your knees. So that is a lot of coverage to protect you against alpha particles and contaminated dust particles. Next thing is just a simple plastic bag. I know it perhaps sounds silly, but a normal garbage can with a hole in it, and another garbage can to put on your head and your arms and such. Try to make a makeshift rain poncho out of plastic bags to keep dust particles, contaminated dust particles, off your body. Very important. Even though it will not protect against the how do you say this? radiation particles that might penetrate through layers of materials, it's better than nothing. This is mostly against the alpha particles. That's why I say that you can only do this after 9 weeks, best 9 weeks after the initial accident. And the next thing is something that painters and people in the construction work or who use chemical products use. These are one of those throwaway protection suits. If you buy a few of these, you can go outside a few times. You cover your whole body from toe to head. Use a gas mask, especially with this one. And before you go inside, you take the suit off and you put it in a plastic bag to keep the contamination inside of the bag and outside of your house. Then you're gonna need protection for your hands. Yet again, these are CBRN graded gloves. Not everyone has these, so the next best thing I would advise are latex gloves. Everyone has normally these in their house, so that's the best improvised way to keep alpha particles of the skin of your hands while doing jobs or repairs outside of your house during a disaster. And you have one of those packets with throwaway gloves that you use at gas stations or something. These are very minimal protection. I'm going to say these two options, but like I said, it's better than nothing. And these are very cheap to disposal after every use and before you enter the house back again. So that's the plus side of it. Next thing, these are two. You need to protect your feet as well because you cannot walk outside. Regular shoes, they will let particles in because these are made of fabrics and fabrics can easily be penetrated, be wet with contaminated water from rain or something, or places, puddles that you step in. So try to wear something sturdy and something you can decontaminate easily. You got Wellington boots that everyone normally has in their house, like rain boots or something that is easily be washable and keeps dirty particles out mostly. And then we have these fishing trousers. This in combination with rain poncho can cover your whole body in an improvised way. It will be comfort with minimal protection, like I said, with all these things, because nothing is 100% even CBRN suits are not 100% radioactive proof. That's why the military won't use them inside of a radiation zone before it passes a certain point. So that's very important to keep in mind. It's like a bulletproof vest. It will stop some, and it will protect you from the first impact. But the longer you stand in a contaminated area, the more chance you have that you get radiation burns or sickness or contamination. So be very careful, look it up, look information up, and try to not expose yourself outside during such disasters. Another important thing to do when you're doing a bug-in, everything that comes inside of your house, you need to test with a Geiger counter, or every person that comes inside. You can take one of those military Geiger counters, or you can take one of those that you use in the workforce, like this small model. It's not that accurate, perhaps, but it can give you a certain measurement to act upon. So when you have an object, you can hold it close by. Try to not interfere with other radiation things, like keep it as far away from your body as possible. Keep cell phones and other appliances. Even smoke detectors can perhaps contain a little bit of radioactivity in a small amount that can disturb the measurements. So that's something to watch out for. Read, how do you say this? Read the information that comes with a Geiger counter very carefully, so you know what you measured. It's not just you put it on and you say, oh, it bleeps red. No, it's a little bit more complicated than that. Like total radiation measured in a certain amount of time, the percentage of of radioactivity, and so on and so on, and millisievert and all the other units that it's counted in. So try to learn to work with a Geiger counter, and how and when you can use it as best, and how do you maintain this device as best as possible. So yeah, that's another thing to learn as a skill to say. When there is a nuclear disaster, like I said before, fill up every container with water before as fast as possible before you close off the water supply. Use everything that you can have to put fresh water in before the public water supply or the rainwater will get contaminated. So use everything: buckets, plastic boxes, all glasses you have inside of the house, water bottles, even perhaps empty bottles, because in a survival situation, every drop will count, because you will not only use it for drinking, but also for washing, hygiene, cooking, and such and such. And even when you put the water inside of a dirty container, like this used beer bottle, you can still put it inside of the Berkey filter to filter it without the risk for nuclear contamination. So that's something very important to think about. This is the how do you say this? The pipe for the water supply. When there is a nuclear disaster, I would advise to close this ones off, especially because of the possibility that the public water supply, I mean, is might be contaminated. So you don't want all that radiation that might be in the water going through all the water lines inside of your house. So that way, later when you can decontaminate the area around your house, you don't need to decontaminate all the pipelines for water lines. So that's also a thing to consider during such a disaster. When you don't have enough water to drink or to use for other, like washing and such and such, it's possibly it's possible that your water supply will run out if you don't use water from the public water supply, or you cannot use the rainwater because of the fallout. So that's where the Berkey filter might get in handy. It can, to a certain amount, it can filter out alpha particles. So in the worst case scenario, and when the fallout is not that bad, or you reuse some other water source that has not been exposed to the fallout, like underground water sources that you got some water from, you can put it inside of the Berkey filter, and it can filter out most of it. But this would be the last resort to use during a in a nuclear disaster, I would say. Another point is vehicles. When during a nuclear disaster, when you have been outside with either your bike or your car, which mine is outside right now, the problem is, first of all, this could be contaminated. So if you rode with your bike outside or parked it a long time outside during a nuclear disaster, your bike might be contaminated with particles, especially when it's full, like with baskets and saddle tasses. So that could form a problem when you take it back inside. So, or you decontaminate your bike before taking it inside, or you leave it outside, because it might be, like I said, contaminated. So you don't bring these particles, nuclear particles, inside of your house. Especially with the car. Why the car? The gas tank might be contaminated with nuclear radiation. That is why cars that have been in Chernobyl these days, they always have to, before they can leave the quarantine zone, they always have to drive the car as much around, so the fuel will get as low as possible. And that way, when the car drives outside of the area, it will have almost no fuel, which that could be spewing contaminated particles in the area during the because of the exhaust, and that's the reason why you can never leave Chernobyl with a full tank if you've been inside of the zone. So that's another thing to think about in a nuclear disaster. Another tip is to always have a little supply of gasoline inside of your house, garage, or some other area where it's protected against fallout and nuclear contamination. So you don't have to, when you need to bug out with your vehicle, that you don't need to go to a gas station to stop, where thousands of people will try to gas up before unloading their evacuation. So you have extra gasoline inside of your inside of your house to have enough gas to leave the contaminated area, even with how do you say this, when you need to take a longer way than perhaps earlier thought. So extra gas can never hurt, especially when other people try to get it at mass, or when the gas stations are empty and such. So that's a good tip for a nuclear disaster. So, garage door. This is also a very dangerous place. Why? Because, as you perhaps can see, the most garages have usually a rubber slip beneath it. So water that might perhaps fall from the car, like ice, snow, or water from the rain that drops off the car, can fall on the floor and gently leave the garage without staying inside. So that's a dangerous place where particles might get blown in through, even if it's small, by the wind. The second dangerous part are these small slits that are used to that connect all the plates. Those might also let air through. Any place that could have some air. Also on the outside, there is some a little bit room perhaps for the system of pulling it all up. So those are some places you perhaps need to tape off. You can lay perhaps some sandbags, tape off the slits, and also tape off the sides so contaminated air doesn't reach the inside of your house, especially when the wind blows against the garage door. When you have a porch like this, this is a good way to get have an extra protection base against your door. So when you come inside, before you go inside, you can decontaminate yourself outside and have an extra barrier to keep stuff inside of the porch that you will not take inside of the house. So especially with porch doors, there are always rubber sides. Check those if those still work. If not, try to close them or tape them off when needed, so contaminated air cannot reach inside of the house. So windows, and especially windows in the roof, are very dangerous places where air could penetrate to perhaps the sides of the windows, or radiate from contaminated dust particles that might lie that has fallen onto the window and radiate through the thinner layer of glass instead of the walls that have more isolation, perhaps. So that's another way to watch out for. Keep those windows closed at all times, especially the roof windows. So there is another danger point: cellar or basement windows. As you can perhaps see, these are not always from the best quality or have even vent holes. So here might gets particles inside during the slits on the outside, or perhaps even broken glass or air vents that are possibly secured inside of the cellar windows. So that's also a place to watch out for. If you possibly can notice, these are ventile entrances where fresh air can get through, blow inside of the house. It's like for like I said, for fresh air. Those are also some vulnerable entrances for particle contaminated air, especially when you have these kind of vents with air conditioning installations. If you have those, try to seal those or put a filter on top of it or through the before the entrances. So nuclear particles must go through layers of filters before they are can get inside of the house. That way you can have fresh air and prevent monoxide poisoning and keep as much radiation outside as you possibly can. So um, that's another point to think about. All right, another vulnerable place is usually above the cooking panels. Which place do I mean? Well, if you can see right here, it is the ventilation that sucks out the smoke and the damp from cooking. As you probably can see, yeah, it's kind of wobbly to see, but as you can see, this is the place where not only air can get sucked out of into, but it can also, when not in use, be blown in by the wind, which sometimes happens. So I would suggest to duct tape this part and also go outside and duct tape the 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 vents, the how do you say this, where the air goes into the vents. Tape that place also off, so contaminated air doesn't pass inside of your house through this suction ventilation. Another vulnerable place is the toilet, in actually multiple ways. First of all, if you like me use toilets water from rainwater from outside, that rainwater might be contaminated. So it's not wise to use that water and pump it inside of your house where it could contaminate this area. The second thing that might happen, that depends on what the local authorities will say, and after doing some testing, is the water supply that you can use for your toilet water. The problem is if that water from how do you say this, the pump stations and the disinfection stations are contaminated, so that will contaminate the public water as a water supply. So if you tap water inside of the toilet and you flushes, the contaminated water might sprinkle up some contaminated water drops and even contaminated damp from the water. So if you're scared that that might happen, just always close the toilet at least. So if there is a chance for contaminated water, that it doesn't rise up and totally and infect the total toilet area and room. So that's another thing to think about. So another vulnerable place is the shower. As you can see, this is where the water damp get sucked out of in my house, but it can go when the wind directly blows inside from outside in the ventil hole. It can possibly blow air back in. So that way the shower area can be contaminated. So like with other things, tape this off and tape it also off on the outside. So contaminated air will not reach the shower area. Another possible entrance for contaminated air is the stove, especially the chimney. So what you can do is, well, depends on what are you planning. Will you block the chimney entrance, or do you block the pipe that is connected with the chimney, or are you still going to use the stove but have the risk to get contaminated air inside? That's a choice I would say that you must make yourself in a moment, because yeah, don't want to freeze inside of your house, especially not during the winter when a nuclear disaster happens. Yeah, because just an idea I want to bring up, because sometimes when it's really windy or storm outside, I can hear when I'm not using the stove, because when you use the stove, it blows the air outside. So that could perhaps possible stop particles from getting in. But when the stove is not in use, I sometimes notice that wind from the chimney get blown in, especially during hard winds and storms, inside of my house, on the side of this pipeline. So that's just something to be wary of. So cooking during a nuclear disaster, like I told before, your ventilation of your cooking plates can be sealed, because contaminated air can get through the ventilation inside of it. So you perhaps need to cook another way inside of your house without a risk for monoxide poisoning. So I would suggest to take something as simple as a gas cooker from camping equipment, and try to cook inside of the house with the least amount of smoke. Um, get some gas canisters ready for replenish them. You can get several cooking. You can cook several meals with it with one gas canister, or make some tea. So that's very important to do and to watch out for, because you don't want to get monoxide poisoning, and you don't want to set a house on fire. So do it perhaps in an area that is not inside of your house, but in a secondary part of your house, like the garage or a porch, that is kind of protected against the fallout, but not yet inside of the living quarters of your house. What's very important is to keep everything, keep information getting in. Perhaps the internet is down, perhaps the news or televisions are down because of whatever reason, or you need other sources of information. I would advise to. I will put this a little bit down. To use an emergency radio with a dynamo, so you can always have power to listen to the news. And because why do I mention this? Because like there is internet, perhaps there is local radio. I would use this to get more information, because like I said before, local governments can lie or perhaps downplay the nuclear disaster, but journalists from the outside are perhaps less biased, or do know things that local people do not know because of misinformation. This radio can get transmission from countries around Belgium, England, Germany, France, the Netherlands. All those you can receive with this small emergency radio. So that's a handy way to keep on the height of the details of the disaster. So that's something to think about. This is my solar panel system with batteries that I put inside of my porch. So I'm not dependent from uh, for when the grid might go down, because the nuclear power plant might have been shut, and that will cause blackouts in the regular energy supply. So try to move things that make energy, like solar panels that you can move inside of a building, so they can get less chance to get contaminated. In like sometimes you need to clean or repair solar panels on the roof, so that could be dangerous. So try to set up installation inside of a building if you can. With like in these porches, it is useful with the glass where the sun rays can get through. So that's a way to gain electricity, and perhaps to help with the financial problems that will arise during the high prices of energy during a power plant disaster. So another thing to keep in mind is keeping animals that might give milk or lay eggs, like chickens and cows or goats. Those products cannot be used because they perhaps used eaten contaminated grass. So that's kind of dangerous to do. So watch out with eating fresh foods that might be contaminated because of the fallout. So another thing is when you have animals that are dependent on grass, like I keep guinea pigs as a stock for animals. It's kind of dangerous to give them how do you say this, to give them grass from outside because the grass might be contaminated, and then you cannot eat the animals or you poison them. So that's something to watch out. So if you have animals that need grass, always have a supply of hay inside of your house that cannot be contaminated, so you can keep your animals perhaps alive and use them as a fresh food source um, in case of a nuclear disaster. So you don't poison your animals and yourself. So that's something to think about. So the same thing can count for your garden. During a fallout, it's very dangerous to eat vegetables that you grown inside of your garden because the fallout could have fallen and becomes upon, especially vegetables that have iron in them, like spinach and such, and everything that grows above the ground is very dangerous to eat because of contamination. When you're desperate, you can eat stuff that have been underground, but like here you can perhaps see carrots. Those to a certain amount when they are underground, you can perhaps cut the least contaminated part. Always first check with the Geiger counter before using them, but only do this when when your food stock supply is run empty. So that's something to watch out for during a nuclear disaster. Try to be as conservative as possible with your food supply as possible. Try to eat the freshest thing or the most valuable things at first before they might get contamination by radiation particles, with especially the stronger one like betas and gammas. Yeah, keep your food supply in check. Ration it if possible, because you don't know what the aftermath will bring of the nuclear disaster. The same thing, especially this is the most important thing I would say, your water supply, because like I said, you do not only need it for drinking but also for washing, cooking and such. So always keep enough water for every person you keep inside of the house in your bugging. Yeah, so that's very important. When you decide to bug inside of your house, I would like you can protect yourself as most as possible against alpha particles, but beta and gamma radiation particles might even penetrate the walls of your house. Normally, you would evacuate, but if evacuation is not possible by some reason, I would advise to take shelter inside of your basement, because the basement is mostly surrounded by layers of walls, stone. It's underground. It has several layers of floors and roofs above them, so there is less chance that those beta and gamma rays will penetrate those structures. Um, yeah, I'm going to talk about fallout shelters in another part of this series in depth, but for just home preparedness, I would advise to keep at least roll out some some mats, perhaps a foldable bed inside of the basement. Have some sleeping bags. Have something to rest your heads. Have some chairs inside and you can switch on for sleeping and sitting at least. So and you also will not stand on the cold floor with that. I know it can perhaps be small and especially frightening for people who have claustrophobia, but the centrum of the house or your basement are the best places to sleep and be the most times in during a nuclear meltdown or a disaster or a nuclear disaster or accident. So you get less exposure to radiation rays. So that's a horrible thought, but it might increase your chance to survive such event. So one of the things that you that when to prepare for such a disaster is actually the thing you cannot prepare for. It's the, how do you say this, the panic, the stress, your mental stability. Those are all factors you cannot, you can train to a certain amount, but when shit hit the fan, nobody knows how they're gonna react, especially in prolonged situations like nuclear disasters. So that's why I would advise to try to be level-headed. To say, try to learn to how to deal with panic, with stress, with emotional outbursts and such. Because when you're in your, let's say in in the basement with your partner and children, to for protection against the radiation rays, you don't want somebody who will get a cabin fever, will panic and do something drastic, or stupid, or something that will bring the other people and the people you love in danger. So that's a way to think ahead, but it's very hard to train for that. The best thing I would advise to do is try to do something to keep you busy, to keep your mind occupied, and to how to deal with the stress better. There are certain things you can do, just when you're with your partner and children or anyone else in your house. Try to keep you occupied with games, board games, listening to music, radio, read a book, tell stories to each other, or such thing. When you're alone with your partner, perhaps some sexual activity could help dealing with the stress of the moment. Um, if you can do meditation techniques like um, full mindfulness is a good example. Perhaps you can take comfort in religious texts or books, or your faith, like the Quran or the Bible. I'm an atheist, so but I find it interesting to read those things. But those are things that can keep your mind ease, help you deal with the stress, and to reduce panic, and give you, most importantly, the will to live, the will to survive. Because uh, the worst thing that could happen is somebody or yourself that is going to admit defeat to the situation. People who say they don't want to live in this situation anymore, who are get depressed, who get panic, who get so stressed out, they get physical problems with it. So that's something to keep up. Keep your spirit up. Keep each other's spirit up. Have the will to live. Try to get through any situation, because what's the alternative to say? Yeah. So keep your spirits high, keep your mind occupied, read, play games, listen to music, think of your next step. Always have something to look forward to, plan, improvise. So those are things to do in a bug, especially in a bug-in when you're locked up and somebody might is perhaps could get some cabin fever, like I said. Yeah, so that's very, I would say, one of the most important things in a bug-in survival situation, especially in during a nuclear disaster. So, so we talked about a lot of different tips and procedures you can do during a bug-in a nuclear disaster. Um, I'm going to be honest. I'm not trained in this area, but I got this information from people who have been who from biographies and people who have been in such situations or worked in a line uh, with nuclear how do you say this, people who are active in a job where they come in contact with nuclear particles or materials. So I would say knowledge is power. Look it all up. Talk to people who are professionals in this area. Try to look information up about it. Look several different sources up, official like military manuals, websites, biographies, official manual instructions. Those things can be very enlightening to learn about what you can do for yourself during a bug-in. Um, I did not talk about the NBC suit yet, and decontamination procedures, but I will do that in the next part of this small series. So now we talked, especially in this part, about begin procedures for civilian use. I know there are perhaps more professional ways and professional materials, but it is just to show you how a normal civilian can adapt to the situation, can can improvise and use everyday materials to protect them as much as possible, protect their partner, protect their children, their family, their friends. So that's what I want to show with this video. I know I'm not the biggest professional in the world, but if you think rational, you can survive. You can increase your chances to get through even the difficult situations as a normal prepper. So that's what I want to give you with this video. I hope you learned something from it. You got so many ideas. Uh, Also to show you that you do not need much to to perhaps survive in difficult situations. Knowledge is power. Improvise. Adapt to the situation. Um, Leave a like. Uh, give me a tip in the reactions if I forgot something, or you have another idea about how I did something. Uh, Subscribe if you would like. I would appreciate that. Thank you for watching. See you in the next part of this series.